Hi guys, my name's Mark, welcome to another MTM video, and today in the workshop we have this Vauxhall Corsa that's failed its MOT. So let's go take a look. So this car failed on a few tyres, but also the rear bush on the lower suspension arm. So in order to have access to that, we first have to take the wheel off. So now that we have the wheel off, we can see exactly what's gone wrong and the reason why it failed. So if you look at this rear bush, you can see there where the rubber of the bush has separated from the inner race. When the rubber separates from that centre race, it'll cause a lot of excess movement in the suspension, and that's not what you want. So let's go ahead and get this replaced. And looking at the car from underneath, it's fairly straightforward. There's one bolt going through that centre race on the rear bush. There's another bolt here going through the front bush and the bottom ball joint. So the first thing to take off is remove the bottom ball joint, and you can see here that the threads go all nice and dirty. So first thing you want to do, clean up the threads as best you can before we try taking them off. Then using a 16mm socket, you can try and crack it. There we go. So in this case, the bolt didn't spin with the nut when it came off. So sometimes these can be quite badly seized in that housing. So using a spanner or another ratchet, you want to start turning it to break it free. And seeing as we're reusing this nut and bolt, we don't want to damage the thread. So now that this is moving, I just want to apply a little bit of pressure to it to see if it'll start to work itself out from the other side. If it's not going, you can put the nut back on a couple of threads and give it a light tap with a hammer. And there we go, that's out. Once that nut and bolt is out, you want to separate the bottom ball joint from this housing. So you do want to pull down. Normally these are quite seized, but there's a little bit of movement in this already. So I'm going to grab a tool so I can lever this properly. So what I'm using is this Wishbone arm tool. It just hooks on to the bottom part of the wishbone. Find somewhere secure to lever against and pull down to separate. Once you're out of the actual housing, you just want to guide the hub out of the way so it doesn't pop back in. And like that. Normally these are a lot more awkward to take off, but we've been lucky today. And to get this bolt out of the front bush, you want an 18mm spanner on the nut in the back, and this is an E-Torx. Not sure if you can see, but this is an E18. So you want to hold the spanner in the back so the nut doesn't spin, and use a gun to separate the bolt. And that's free. In this case, the nut in the back is captive, so it's not going to go anywhere, but sometimes they can break free of the weld and they'll be loose like a standard nut and bolt, so just be aware of that. So the same goes for the rear bush. So you want a 18mm spanner on the top nut, your E18. In this case, the nut was loose, so if you were to just take this out, the top would just spin. So there you go, out. So now that all 3 points of contact are loose, we want to try and get this wishbone out of the subframe. So this can be a little bit tight, but just guide it out with a pry bar. So you want to prise the front out first. It'll swing forward, and then you should be able to lift it up enough to try and work out the back, but if not, just use your persuader. There we go. Now actually looking at the old part now that it's off, the actual bush itself looks fine, but it's just where it connects to that centre race. Might be hard to see on camera, but yeah, it's just started to break apart around where it joins that centre race. And if it's not secured to that properly, then it's just going to move. So now we can fit our nice new part. So this just goes back in the reverse order. So the back end in first. Just try and get that located as best you can. And then you can slide in the front. Now the rear bush isn't in properly, it's at too much of an angle. But what I'm going to do is just so that this stays in roughly the right place, I'm going to insert the front bolt. I'm not going to tighten it up, just to hold it in the correct place. So even though the bolt is in the front, the top part isn't exactly flush. So what you want to do is take a screwdriver, put it through as long as you can see the inner part of the race, and then you use this to kind of guide it into the right place. Like that, so it goes flush. You can then put a bolt then in the place of this screwdriver back into where it needs to be. So once you've got your bolt that's able to insert through the bottom, if it's still not perfectly in line, you can grab a larger spanner just to help guide the inner race, like you were doing with the screwdriver. So now that you have the bolt in that back bush, put the spanner on the nut, and you can gun it up. So you can guide the hub back onto the bottom ball joint, and tap this back up into place. So what I'm looking for there is for the indent or the cutout that's in the taper of the bottom ball joint. I need that to be in line with this bolt hole. So showing you on the old one, there is a little cutout there that when this is in the position in the flange there, the bolt can go and slide through that hole, making it more secure. So seeing as this is in position, I'm going to put that bolt back in, and then you can put the bolt back on the other end, a couple of threads. Then you want to tighten up the bottom ball joint. There we go. So before we tighten up this front bush, we want to jack this arm up so it's level. That's because that's going to be the normal sitting position of the suspension when the weight is down on the car. So if we tighten it up as is now, the bush will be tight in its place, and then when the weight is on the car, it's going to be twisting upwards constantly, so it's going to wear this bush out faster. So you want to make sure that you've already started the bolt by hand. And then it's always good to double check all of your bolts by hand. Now it's just the wheel on and road test. I'm not going to road test it just yet because there's a few more jobs I still have to do before it goes for the MOT retest. But that is how you go about replacing the passenger side front wishbone arm on a Vauxhall Corsa. So guys, if this has helped you, please give us a like on the video, leave a comment if you have any questions, and if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.